Imagine being the most pacifist officer in the United States Navy and then to be remembered as the captain who showed the world that the Royal Navy was, in fact, not as invincible as everyone thought. Isaac Hall was born on March 9, 1773, in Derby, Connecticut, and served in the First Barbary War, in which he was involved in the Battle of Derna. In the time between the First Barbary War and the War of 1812, Hall was captain of the USS President, but Commodore John Rogers, who was senior to him, was sailing the USS Constitution, but he didn't like how the Constitution sailed. Being senior officer has its privileges because Commodore John Rogers ordered Isaac Hall to swap ships with him, in which Isaac Hall was all too happy to oblige because to Hall, the USS Constitution was his favorite frigate. During his time as captain of the USS Constitution, Isaac Hall ferried diplomats across the Atlantic to Great Britain and France, and this is during the time when the tension between the two countries was escalating because there's a lot of factors that led to the War of 1812, but one of the biggest issues was impressment, which was basically officers of the Royal Navy were capturing American merchant ships and using the sailors, the seamen, to serve into the Royal Navy. Isaac Hall returned from his European cruise, and on June 18th, the United States declared war against Britain, the War of 1812. And so Isaac Hall had to refit the Constitution and prepare to go out to sea again. July 2nd, Hall and his men were ready to go out to sea, and these were the orders given to him by Secretary of the Navy, Paul Hamilton. If you should fall in with an enemy vessel, you will be guided in your proceeding by your own judgment, bearing in mind, however, that you are not voluntarily to encounter a force superior to your own. On your arrival at New York, you will report yourself to Commodore Rogers. If you should not be in that port, you will remain there until further orders. This is important. July 16th, the Constitution is around New Jersey, and everyone expected to be in New York by the next day. But in the afternoon, the lookout spotted multiple sails, and so everyone on the ship thought it was Commodore John Rogers' squadron, which Isaac Hall was supposed to meet up with. But it turns out that the sails spotted were actually British sails, and so there was a 3-day race of Isaac Hall and the Constitution trying to escape this squadron that was chasing them. It was intense. After narrowly escaping the British Royal Navy, Isaac Hall was in a predicament. He couldn't sail to New York because that's where the enemy squadron was heading, and he had no idea where Commodore Rogers was. And so Isaac Hall decided to sail up to Boston. Isaac Hall was disobeying orders, but in this particular case, this was about tactic and strategy. Once he was in Boston, Isaac Hall had his purser get provisions for the Constitution because supply was running low, and also there was a possibility of facing a blockade from the British squadron, so he wanted to escape as soon as possible. Once again, Isaac Hall found himself in a difficult situation. There was a favorable wind to sail out of Boston, but Isaac Hall knew if he sailed without orders, he would be court-martialed. However, if he stayed put, then he would be blocked in. He would be facing a blockade, so what's a man supposed to do? Risk it, obviously. So August 2nd, Isaac Hall and the Constitution was out at sea again. The next few days, sailing without orders, Isaac Hall and the Constitution encountered multiple American merchant ships. And these merchant ships, they told Hall where they spotted British vessels, but of course, being like small privateers, they didn't want to encounter, they did not want to interact. So it was pretty much nothing until August 19th. At 2 o'clock, August 19th, the HMS Guerriere was spotted by the Constitution. Funny how the Guerriere was one of the ships in the British squadron that was chasing the Constitution at New York, and now here they are face to face, ready for an actual face-off. The Guerriere fired first, and this is how the Constitution got its famous nickname. The shot that struck the Constitution's hull at long range bounced harmlessly away, and the word ran through the ship, "Her sides are made of iron!" So she gained her name Old Ironside. The Guerriere was firing as her guns bore, but the Constitution was silent. Lieutenant Morris turned to Hall and questioned, "Permission to fire, sir?" "No, sir, not yet," said Hall. "Mr. Morris, I will tell you when to fire, so stand ready and see that not a shot is thrown away." It wasn't until about 6:05 when Isaac Hall gave the orders to fire back at the Guerriere. First Division fire! The next, sir, pour in the whole broadside. Now, boys, pour it into them. The Guerriere was firing as she came up with the waves into her opponent's rigging to disable, but the Constitution's men fired on the down roll, sending their shot directly into the enemy's hull. Isaac Hall was standing at the arm chest for a good view. At the first broadside, he knew the game was his. By heaven, he shouted, that ship is ours! To his excitement, he jumped up and down on the arm's chest, oblivious of the fact that this furious activity had split his tight white uniform breeches from. After 15 minutes of such fire, the Guerriere began to crumble. Isaac Hall cheered, Huzzah, my boys! We made a brig of her! Someone took up the cry. Give her another and we'll make her a. The two ships came into close contact with each other, and then there was a boarding party that happened, and by 7 o'clock, the battle was over. The USS Constitution won, and the captain of the HMS Guerriere came aboard the Constitution, ready to surrender his sword, but Isaac Hall politely declined taking it. After the battle, one of the sailors on the USS Constitution made an observation about Isaac Hall. Moses Smith saw his commander passing among the men in the sickbay and thought that he even looked more truly noble, bending over the hammock of a wounded tar than when invading and conquering the enemy. The HMS Guerriere was such a wreck after the battle that the only thing the Constitution could do was just set it ablaze. August 29th, 10 days after the battle, the Constitution was sailing towards Cape Cod, and off in the distance there were multiple sails, which turned out to be Commodore Rogers. The American victory from this battle was exactly what New England needed, because the Federalist Party had such a stronghold in this region, and here comes a son from Connecticut from this region winning a battle and showing the world that the British Royal Navy is not as invincible as everyone believed it to be. And so this was a huge morality boost, especially since Isaac Hall's uncle was William Hall, and there was a whole disaster that happened up in the Detroit area. Unfortunately, after this victory, Isaac Hall received news that one of his younger brothers died, and so he relinquished command of the Constitution to William Bainbridge, who was supposed to have the Constitution anyway.